All right, so there's a few things to cover with the 118 scale. Predominantly, just to tell you right off the bat, if you're looking at getting an RC chassis that's advertised as 118 scale, don't trust it. If you could find the dimensions of that particular 118 scale vehicle, like on YouTube or just images, or somebody that owns it and can give you those dimensions, definitely look that up. The RC world with scale, they're horrible at it. Some companies, I should say, some companies are horrible at it. Even some of the trusted companies like Traxxas, they advertise 118 scale, not even close. When you see like companies like FMS, they're pretty good at the scale, maintaining the scale of the body. One, because it's licensed, and part of that licensing is keeping true to the scale of the vehicle for them to be able to portray that vehicle as is. And then sometimes those clause don't necessarily relate to the chassis of the actual RC. So they'll have a very accurate body, but not so accurate chassis. So you have a vehicle that looks awesome, but with the wheelbase that looks completely destroyed. Destroyed as far as like wheel length and base from left to right. So it just looks wonky and funky. I hate that. FMS is pretty good at maintaining the scale of the body, that comes along with the licensing, and making a chassis that fits that body properly. That's one of the companies that I'm very thankful for, and I'm glad that they're moving towards that. Their 118 scale is true to scale. Their 112 scale, awesome. Of course, you're gonna have little variances with lifted trucks, lifted Jeeps. That's understandable. You give or take 12 inches or 24 inches in a real vehicle, you're gonna give and take a couple centimeters or a couple quarter inches of the wheelbase on an RC. So that's to be expected. If you can see this right here, this is a prime example. This is my custom 112 scale, 112 scale buggy. I haven't featured this much in my YouTube channels because I'm still working on it. It's a big project. This is a Traxxas chassis. It's advertised as 118 scale. I haven't modified the chassis, wheelbase or distance here any way. This is the true, what they believe is a 118 scale Yeti. And the Yeti, that's an actual vehicle. Like that's an actual off-road vehicle, which is, it's mind-boggling because I think Traxxas, when I bought this vehicle, I saw it and I was like, man, 118 scale, it looks cool. And the body looked cool and it looked proportional to the distance of the tires and everything, to like the actual an actual ATV. And when I got it, even the body was disproportionately large. It was not even close to 118. I kept it around because it was pretty cool as far as speed is concerned and the shocks. And I ended up using it for my 112 bug. And we all know that the bug is a fairly small vehicle, so it fit well for that chassis. So like I said, this is prime example of what are they thinking. And it's kind of like a disservice. I think I mentioned it before. It's a disservice to the consumer. I want to think that Traxxas has some kind of ideas behind what they're doing, but I can't trust Traxxas for that stuff. Losi, I wish they would be true to the scales, but they're not. Also, Losi, I love their vehicles. One of my first RCs was the Losi Dune Buggy 118 scale. It was awesome. It performs well. And I know they sacrifice that wheelbase. They extend that wheelbase for their vehicles in order to gain stability at the high speeds. when we look at a 118 scale vehicle, that speed that they're going, it's blistering. If it was to scale, I mean, it would be an Indy car speeds on a dune buggy. So it's disproportionate in that way. So I can see why they do that to their vehicles. Most RC people, they want speed. They don't care if it's scaled or not. They want to see a little dune buggy that goes really fast. So that's understandable to their market, but not too true to the scale. So Losi, speaking of Losi, 124 scale. So they came up with their 124 scale vehicles, awesome suspension, awesome vehicles. The Losi 118, the 124 vehicles are awesome. And when I was initially like working my way through the RCs and custom making my RCs, I looked at that chassis, the 124 scale chassis, and I did use it. This is a Losi 124 scale, and I was able to make a little ATV, like I'm not sure what they call them. They're not ATVs. They're like side by sides, right? And this is kind of like a Renly, I believe they're called Renly type vehicle. It's a dune buggy, but it's small. All right, it's small. It fits a full size GI Joe in there. This was one of my earliest RC customs. The vehicle doesn't really exist, so there's some liberties with this, but you can fit a full size 25th anniversary GI Joe in there. And I maintain the body distances. I had to upgrade it to an Acceleron package, a brushless package. You can see there's a little bit of upgraded parts, but for the most part, the chassis for the 124 works for the 118 on a very small scale. Hold on, let me see. Oh yeah, I think the 124 scale would also work with something like this. This is a 118 scale side by side. And as you can see, you wouldn't have to do too many modifications to the distance for those wheels to fit in there. You'll have to sacrifice a little bit on the look, because these tires are going to go off to the side just a tiny bit. Enough to make me uncomfortable, but probably still try that. It might bug me. I'm kind of a scale snob. You might see some customizers out there. They make good vehicles, and there's some pretty cool vehicles out there. And not to like talk bad or anything, but they usually just grab the body of a vehicle and then just superimpose it on top of an RC chassis. It works, and it's doable. That's something that you want to ask yourself, what I'm going for. When you're picking your, let me clarify that. When I'm picking my projects, I start off with, what do I want to create? So with the Vamp, I always liked the Vamps. I like the look of the Vamp. The iconic look of the Vamp. I think I talked about this a little bit on my other videos. I wanted to maintain it. One of my biggest things when I was little is, playing with a vehicle and then seeing those commercials of RCs that I couldn't afford at the time. And I always thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if the GI Joe vehicle came with RC? Like if, we could control it, So I grew up, and now I do what I wanted to do when I was little, because I could afford it now, kind of. So I don't want to mess with the look as much as I possibly can. I don't want to destroy the look. I could take this body, cut off the bottom, hollow it out, basically, and then just plop it on a 118, on an advertised 118 Losi chassis. But then you're gonna have the wheels are gonna be out here. Like when you look at you mentioned the Mini T. Look at the Mini T. The wheels are out here. The body is little and it sits on top. That's not how vehicles usually look. even if you look at some of the highly modified vehicles out there, you have the rock racers. Those are highly modified, but then they still have some semblance of scale to them. They're very specific vehicles. They do look wonky because they're highly modified. The suspension on them is ridiculous. The speed and torque is just crazy awesome vehicles, but they don't look normal. And that's what you want to ask. Do you care about the aesthetics of it? Do you care of how it looks? And it's not, like I said, it's not nothing against it. I'm just a snob. I'm just, I don't know, like, what is that called? OCD about it. OCD about maintaining the scale and the look. That's why my customs, they take me a while because I have to figure it out. I have to figure out, the connecting points, the tires, and all that stuff. So yes, number one question: what are you looking for? If you just wanna, get the body and superimpose it, that's not too hard. It's just about maintaining those posts of the losi. If you're gonna work with a mini T, look at the posts, and then you basically just pop, take off the wheels, carve out as much possible space from there, and then make your connecting hose, and then you could run those posts right through the body and put D10 pins, and you're done. But again, you're gonna have a vehicle that looks not like a Vamp. It's not gonna maintain the aesthetics of it. So when you're picking the chassis, this chassis is, I can't say enough of it. It has torque and it has speed. It's pretty amazing because, as you can see, the price that I sent it to you, it's $60 or something like that. As far as RCs are concerned, fairly cheap. The mini T's are gonna cost you like $150. The basic package, and they're awesome. I wouldn't, how do you say? I wouldn't compare the two. This is fast. It has torque, but it's not gonna beat a Losi Mini T. You're not gonna get the same ridiculous, crazy speed as a Mini T, but it's gonna be fast. Like, look at the video. This Vamp, for its size and its weight, the weight it is carrying, it's fast. And this is the chassis it has. So this thing is fast. I could pop wheelies. I have good control. It doesn't really roll over. It lays down. When you're taking the turns, it buckles down. The suspension is pretty awesome. It's 4-wheel drive. For the size of it and being able to maintain the scale, I was very surprised how it came out. Because of course, that one, the body is a little bit extended, so I had to sacrifice that. But this, like I said, this for $60, you can't beat it. It does come with some of the downfalls is that the suspension, it has open ports here. They're not closed off, so dust and little rocks that get in there are gonna make that suspension not work as well. I know that they sacrifice that takes some money to get good suspension, but these suspension, these springs here, this whole suspension can be replaced with aftermarket 124 scale shocks. Okay, so these shocks can be replaced, and that's what I did with my Razor. If you haven't seen that video, look at it, and it kind of tells you. And that was the first time that I changed these shocks. I usually just put a little piece of plastic there to cover that up, and they hold up pretty darn good. That was my quick fix. My aftermarket fix is buying 124 scale shocks that fit this, and I can replace them. This chassis, like I said, it does take some shortcuts to save money. It does use a 5-wire servo, which we know, I'm pretty sure you're aware. 3-wire servos is the way to go. The 5-wire servos, they're less costly. Give me a minute. I have a cat that's bugging me over here. So my cats, they scratch at the door when they want to come in. So pardon that interruption. Where was I? Oh yeah, the shortcuts. So it does have a 3-wire servo, but that's easily replaced. Just put a 3-wire servo in there. It does come with an integrated receiver and electric speed controller that sits underneath here. It takes a little bit of work to get it into, but you can replace that with your own circuit board, your own receiver and transmitter. It has battery ports here on the side. I replaced the batteries that comes with. The first couple vehicles that I got, the batteries weren't reliable. I don't know if you're gonna get one with reliable batteries or not, but I replaced those batteries. So I just take off this whole, you can cut here, and you can take off this whole bucket. It gives you more space to work with. So then you end up with the motor. The motor is good to go. I've never really had any trouble with the heat sink. Sometimes I cut this heat sink, sometimes I leave it alone, just depending on what how much room I need. But I wouldn't suggest changing this motor. And this is a brushed motor. If you did, which it looks like you're pretty advanced with your RC. If you know your RC stuff, I mean, you replace this with a similar size brushless motor, you're gonna get a lot more speed from this. And I think that this speed is fairly good for the vehicle and the scale. But hey, if you can make it go faster, why not, right? So you could do those upgrades. Let me see. Yeah, this chassis, for the price, for the speed and torque you get, amazing. It gets, like I think I mentioned this before in my other videos, this particular RC, the chassis is amazing, but it has been labeled and relabeled. Just the marketing, I don't know what it is, but you can see that this vehicle doesn't look like anything of the pictures that I have, that I sent you, and I have. It doesn't have anything remotely to do with this. I mean, I've seen it advertised as a 126, 128 vehicle, 124 scale vehicle. So, but what's in common all the time is that you'll see that motor that's right down the center. Everything as far as the working components are right down the center, and they're very condensed. Once you take out these batteries, you get even more space, so a lot to work with. It's great vehicle. I would definitely suggest this one. This one for that wheelbase, it's narrow, okay? This one is this vehicle. All right. And this, it's a big vehicle. It's my Humvee Lamborghini Cheetah hybrid. The Lamborghini Cheetah was a big vehicle. The Humvee was a big vehicle. So you know that the Lamborghini Cheetah Humvee hybrid doesn't exist. So I can take some liberties. All right, but it's kind of up there. All right, this is a bigger 118, 116 scale GI Joe. This is on the taller side. Leather neck, and I believe rock, what is it called, roadblock, that was portrayed by The Rock. Those figures are taller too, so I kind of like this size vehicle goes well with my 118 scale or 116 scale MRAP. That MRAP kind of fits the scale, and it moves more towards that 116 scale. So this vehicle looks great next to that MRAP. It makes it look probable. But of course, this vehicle doesn't exist. It's a hybrid, so a little bit of liberties. And even then, the Humvee itself, it is scaled to 118 scale, and the Lamborghini Cheetah is also scaled to 118 scale. So, you know, it's kind of some liberties, but still maintaining that. And it's very small. So like I was telling you, like I was asking, like, do you want to expand the body for the vamp? I did want to expand the body with the vamp. You know, I was staunch with maintaining the look of the vamp. But the thing is with the vamp, it's a small package. I mean, this thing it's small package. You could almost see that it's two-wheel drive. There's a lot of space in the back where the engine is gonna be at, and then you have like zero room for any kind of component in here. That's the difficulty of maintaining a vamp look and style and design, and try to, you know, minimize the aesthetics, minimize the look of it, not compromise the original look of it, and still maintaining a good vehicle. That's why when I expanded this body to fit the bigger GI Joes, so they don't look cramped and they look normal in there, when I expanded it, it gave me room to use this chassis. I didn't think it was gonna be that fast. I wasn't expecting too much, because the added weight compared to all the stuff that I have here with two figures, as opposed to the design, how it was intendedly designed to. This is a Lexan body. I mean, they don't weigh anything. I mean, they're light. They don't really care about the scale. As you can see, this chair, I mean, this seat is super small compared to the actual Jeep body. The tires are, well, you know, you could take some liberties because it's a Jeep, so modifications. But still, you know, there's no room in here for any kind of actual person to drive this. Even if you got an action figure, you would have a 124 scale figure that sits in a 124 scale seat with a 128 scale body Jeep. It's weird. But you know, I don't know. Anyways, before I go off on a tangent, so that's what I was able to do. So I was able to maintain that this chassis, and as you can see, there's a little bit of a design change here on the bumper, because this was a different model than this one, but it's the same wheelbase. Where I was able to save a little bit of that room, as you can see, like the vamp here, you see the wheels stick out just a tiny bit, right? So I was able to barely fit these tires to have that same effect, a little bit off to the side. And then I was able to maintain that height. So the vamp has a weird, like, it sits low. There's no real room for the springs here. There's no real where the tire is gonna go. Like if it was a real vehicle and it was off-roading, you would get no shocks. This one, because of the added weight, it can sit low and have the same aesthetics, but then when it's running around, it still has a lot of travel. Okay? You might see that effect kind of like in rally vehicles. They have a lot of travel once they're going. Once they're taking bumps, you have that effect. They might sit low, but when they have to take jumps, then they have the travel. That's another thing you want to take in consideration when you're doing these. Do you want to maintain that look? You know, me being the scaled snob that it was, I did want to maintain that look. I don't want it to have the wheels down here. I have an old conversion of this. It was a two-wheel drive. It used an old 118 Le Mans, I think, Kiyoshi. It was a Kiyoshi two-wheel drive 118 scale vehicle RC that I wanted to incorporate into the Vamp. I was able to maintain the Vamp look, but the wheels, and it was only two-wheel drive, but the wheels sat low. So when it sat, when it was sitting normally, there was a huge space in between here, and it just looked, it worked. It bugged me. It bugged me so much that I hardly ever like showcase it. I think I destroyed it. I sacrificed it for parts or something like that. But this one was, you know, like I said, this is the expanded body though. With my constant search for to maintain that, of course, I did this version. This is the version, the 1/18 scale. This is an actual 1/18 scale vamp. There's not too much modifications other than the hood. This is a rock crawler. It has an acceleron package, and it is lossy. This is a lossy rock crawler, and as you can see down here, it has a 2700 or 20. Sorry about that. Hold on. 8750 kV. No, 8750 kV brushless. 124 scale crawler. It maintains those tires. They don't stick out that much. This spacing, I didn't have to do much to the bottom. There's no real modifications down here. It's cool, and there's pretty close spacing in here. If you haven't seen a video too, I have it in the desert out there. It's a short, I think it's a short video of how it moves. It's just the motor though, even if it's brushless, it has a lot of weight to carry. So you think, you know, it's a rock crawler, it has rock crawler articulation, so it can handle the weight. It can handle the weight, but it because of the weight, because of the weight and the modifications, it moves well, but it is a little bit spassy. It's not designed to carry this much weight on it, even though it is a rock crawler. My cat again. Now he wants out. Give me a minute. I'm coming. I ain't know I didn't give you enough attention, huh? You're a good girl. Come on. Sorry. So the 124 scale does work. Oh, sorry. It's not a 124 lossy. It's a Charisma. No, not a Charisma. I forgot which one it is. It's a off-brand, but it has the motor up front. Because most crawlers, what I found out was that they had the actual transmission and the motor in the middle. And with the Vamp, you can't have it in the middle. Not without compromising the height. You'll have a Vamp that's sitting like this normally. Like if you had that motor in the middle, and then it would look not good. As you can see, it almost looks like a spider. It gives it a weird spider effect. It doesn't have that low look to an original Vamp. So if I was gonna use a 124 lossy crawler, then I would have to make space for that, so I wouldn't have to compromise that internal space where they sit. But with that engine up front, this 124 scale crawler has that engine up front. That's why I needed that space for that motor up front. That's why I modified this hood. So yeah, this one maintains that. You know, crawlers, they're not intended to go fast. Even with the brushless systems, they don't go fast. I have a version of a crawler, 1/18 scale G.I. Joe. I think it's one of my earliest videos and my earliest customs. It's a World War II Jeep, a Vietnam era Jeep, and it could carry 3 old school G.I. Joes and 1982 G.I. Joes. It was pretty fun. I mean, that thing had some serious modifications. But it worked, and that one was fun. I wish I still had it. I think I still have it here, but I wanted to update it. Anyhow, sorry, I go off on tangents a lot. That's that. What I've been working on is using something that is more for this scale. That allows me to maintain the look, the aesthetics, don't compromise the interior, and then be able to incorporate something into it. I came across, I think it's a 128 vehicle. I made a Willys Jeep, a Tamiya Willys Jeep. actually, I'm not actually even sure if Tamiya can claim it, because there's a lot of companies that make this. Tayo. Every RC company has made one version of the Willys Jeep, but I always wanted one with the 110 scale, and I think you've seen what I think about that 110 scale when you're looking at cartoon vehicles. But to digress, the chassis that I used was this. They're right now, I think they're selling for like $58. There's a couple versions. There's like a rally car, I think 128 scale rally car, 125th scale trucky or something like that. They're 4-wheel drive. They're very condensed, small. The wheelbase is fairly narrow, and then there's not too much space that's used for all the electronics. Here, let me take it apart. I'm still working on finishing this one. It's kind of like a long-term project. The connecting points for this one is takes a little bit of a variation on this. It has 2 D10 pins back here that you just saw me remove. I put these off to the sides because they're tiny. And it has a slip, like a male and female part back here, up front, that just slips in. So I just lift and then pull out, I think. There it is. All right. So this is a tiny chassis. All right. That motor is strong, and those gear ratios are strong. I was very pleasantly surprised with the speed and torque of this thing. This thing is amazing. I'll take a picture of it and then try to post it on the video or send it to you. This thing is pretty amazing. I'm very surprised. When I built it and I put all that weight on top of it, I was like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to sacrifice some speed for this. No, this thing is fast, and it pops wheelies like within like inches of you going full throttle on this thing. So it pops good wheelies on this, which is kind of, you know, the wild wheelie thing. That was its thing, right? Kind of like a mini micro servo here. And it is a 3. I got a 3-wire servo that comes with this. It's minimized. I mean, you can see it comes with a combo receiver, transmitter, electric speed controller, and it does have lights on it. The variations of this vehicle, one of the biggest things is the lights, how many lights it can support. So when you're looking at purchasing this, look and see what you want. Basically, that's the biggest difference between the models. The style body it comes with, which is a Lexan body, and the amount of lights it has that it can support. I don't think that they show you if it comes with a 5 or a 3-wire servo when you purchase it. So it's kind of like a toss-up. Kind of like with some vehicles, the different versions of those vehicles, sometimes they upgrade those servos. But again, you know, this is about $58, $65. And for the price, the speed and the torque that you get, pretty cool. But it also sacrifices, because of its size and its intended use, which is like an indoor kind of thing, it doesn't have that good of shocks. That's one of the things that I want to upgrade on this thing. I want to figure out how to modify those connecting points or whatnots. So it has some suspension, but it's not that great. I haven't seen all the versions of this vehicle. I just ordered the newest off-road truck version of this. It's still on its way. I'm gonna make a video review on it, but this wheelbase will fit perfectly for this. Now, mind you, these are monster trucks, and the connecting point for it, I mean, you're talking about an inch. No, about half, I'd say 3/4 of an inch of the connecting points. So that would put the connecting point for the tire somewhere around this area. So I would still be able to maintain that distance for these wheels, which is great. I'm very excited about working with this chassis on that vehicle. I would say that this is probably going to be the best bet to make a vamp that's fast, it has good torque. You're gonna get 4-wheel drive. You're gonna sacrifice a little bit on the suspension unless you can modify it, which would be cool if you could, because it looks like you have some pretty good RC technical skills there. But this is gonna be exciting. If you could get it done, go for it, man. But I would definitely suggest this one because it's gonna give you speed, torque, and for the price, that, I mean, it's pretty good. This is very promising chassis. Like I said, I'll send you a picture of it, a picture of the vehicle. I think it's on both Aliexpress and Banggood. You can also find it on eBay from American sellers, but they kind of mark it up. The tires, I did want to mention the tires on this one. As you can see, the tires are pretty aesthetically looking close to that, to the original. There's some tires that I've used before from Playmobil, which is very weird. I don't have one near me here, but it's crazy because Playmobil actually has some really soft tires that that they use for their vehicles. They're rubber, they're soft. Oh yeah, here it is. These are Playmobil tires, and they're soft rubber. And they're not as soft as Losi. These are Losi 124 scale tires, right? They're not as soft, but they are definitely rubbery, grippy tires. I'm always searching for like parts. I mean, on Goodwill and eBay, if it's cheap enough, I might risk it and buy, tires on eBay. But then it's kind of hard to tell about the sizes. So these are like prime examples of Losi tires. 124 scale. Again, back to that scale. They advertise 124 scale. They end up looking like 118 scale tires. Of course, within perspective, because you're thinking about monster tires versus raw crawler tires. And tires are always that one. There's a very wide liberties as far as the sizes are concerned. What you name them. But you see a 124 scale, kind of like a raw crawler tire, and a 118 scale G.I. Joe, and they look like normal tires that are pretty rugged. So yes, keep an eye out for those. Don't go with the 118 scale tires, man. You're just gonna end up with ginormous tires. Okay. Even like, look at this thing. It's considered 128 scale or 124 scale, and these tires are huge. They're like almost usable for the 118, which you could, if you wanted to do like a Jeep. I could definitely use these tires. Okay, so going back on topic. Sorry, sometimes I go on tangents, so I gotta watch myself. Going on the tire and the build. Once you figure out what chassis you're gonna use, then comes the tire. The tire design, trying to maintain whatever aesthetics you want to keep. I wanted to keep this kind of to the version of the 110 scale. And I wanted to keep this within the parameters of that slight but not overwhelming distance away from the body. Once you figure out what you want or willing to sacrifice, then that's when you start thinking about building your tire. Now, when you're doing all these builds, you kind of want to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of time. So when you're building this tire, what I do a lot is superimposing. So instead of modifying the hub, because all these tires come with different hexagon sizes, especially these fairly cheap RCs. They are hobby grade. I consider these like hobby grade, like on the lower end of hobby grade, because they're fast. They have all the electronics. They have the proportional steering, proportional power, like forward and reverse. Everything's proportional. So they're kind of like quasi RC hobby grades. They're definitely not toy grade. You're not gonna find this at Walmart. The suspension and the proportionality. They're getting there, but they're not quite there yet. But instead of modifying that whole hub, I try to maintain as much as possible on this. You mentioned the connecting points for the vehicle. try not to compromise those angles. Once you compromise those angles, then you start getting into a lot more difficulty. Sometimes when I compromise where where I want to attach, or where I can attach these springs, then it starts kind of playing with the design. You know, the engineers, the toy engineers that work on these vehicles, all the connecting points, they're there for a particular reason, you know. But, you know, it's kind of a hit or miss. If you get a chance to look at my MRAP, my 1/18 scale custom MRAP, it kind of talks about those points where I have to keep on moving those points and try to figure out the connecting points for the springs, for the shocks, in order for it to work properly. That one took a lot of time and a lot of more design upgrades, because I actually incorporated all the RC parts into an existing chassis. The chassis itself was pretty strong plastic, so I mean, that thing is pretty awesome. That was a beast of a project. If you get a chance, it talks a little bit more about those connecting points. But if you can not compromise those connecting points, don't do it. But if you have to, then of course, then it just takes a little bit of figuring out, and that's on a case-by-case basis. I wish I could tell you there was a particular like formula for that, but no, it's kind of like a hit or miss. You know, connect it, kind of see how it moves, and then plug it in and test drive it, and then keep on modifying it on that stuff. So yeah, but for the most part, what I do is I cut off the star. I cut off as much as I can to minimize what I can use. Keeping in mind the flat surfaces. Don't try to compromise those flat surfaces that connect with those hubs, because once you compromise those connecting surfaces, then you start compromising the flexibility and how it rolls. So once I cut that off, then I had to figure out where exactly I'm going to connect it with a particular rim. So if you see here, you see a screw, and you see God, I forgot the name of these things. It's a little spacer or something like that, right? That spacer is intended to give a little bit of space for that connection. So when I'm getting this existing rim, and I'm going to superimpose the tiny connecting point, basically that little circle, then that's what I want to take in consideration when I'm creating this tire. That way they don't stick out more, or I can bring them in. It just depends on what you're going to go for. Let me show you here the comparison. You see where this rim, the actual connection is inward, and then here the connecting point is the outward portion. So because I wanted to maintain that, I had to basically overextend that hub when I created this hub. This hub is a lossy tire with a lossy rim, and I took this hub and I put it into the lossy tire, and then I created spacers to give me this space. So this tire, as simple as I wish it would be, it's complicated in order for me to get those functionalities out of this. The space, the fit, the look, because I wanted the spokes of an original Vamp in there just to give it a little bit more authenticity. I know it's a small detail, but you know, with my OCD, that's kind of how I work. So I took there's a lot of components that go into this tire. Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you find a lossy tire that has everything, and it melts together with the RC that you're going to use, and it all works fine. That rarely happens, but when it does, it's sweet. This is another chassis that I was considering for the Vamp. When I sent you the picture of this vehicle, the $60 one, I also sent you the top vehicle of that is this vehicle. This is a Drift 1/18 scale vehicle. It's just pretty cool. But I got it and I wanted to see what it was all about as an experiment. This is awesome. The space between here is pretty cool. It almost fits perfect with with the Vamp. I actually was working towards a 1/18 scale rally car, and this is why I created this. Okay. And I wanted to make it a rally car, and it does fit. Sorry about that. The electronics are getting in the way, and everything is. It's still work in progress, but as you can see, this is a 1/18 scale rally car, the Red Bull. I just thought it looked cool. It's a plastic body. I've modified the windows to actually be windows. The front, back, rear, sides, the interiors from a different 1/18 scale rally vehicle. Everything's plastic to minimize the weight, and it looks like the RC chassis belongs to the RC body. I did have to extend it. Well, speaking of connecting points, see, I use Velcro for this one. I might keep that Velcro. This is the first time I use Velcro. I did have to extend and put spacers in between, because when it comes originally, it actually is about the size of a Vamp. You can see here, I think this chassis is going to be great for a Vamp, because without those spacers that I put in between, this would be almost the wheelbase of an actual Vamp. And you're not going to compromise too much tire size on that. And you still have some space, about maybe about half an inch that you could work with. I'm still debating whether I want to stick with my 1/18 scale rally vehicle or not. The performance on this, I will tell you, it's highly designed to be what they advertise it to be, which is a drift car. That's the only thing I'm slightly disappointed at it. It has a big motor for this size on that Vamp. It's only 2-wheel drive. The suspension, that's one of the things where it saves space here. The suspension is an actual wire down here. So you save a lot of space in here. There's no connecting points for shocks or anything like that. Which, as you can see, the functions right here, they start almost at the midpoint of the tire and back. That's when it starts rising up. That's one of the biggest things that hinder the Vamp from any kind of like RC function. In order to put, if you were using anything other than this, you would have to use something like an F1 Racer Kiyoshi 1/18 scale. That is like an F1 Racer, and it has like a very minimalistic steering mechanisms down here. I mean, you're talking about like small, thin layers of metal that comprise that mechanism. That mechanism is pretty cool. I used it for my Vamp, my 1/18 scale Aoi Striker. I used that F1 Racer, which they're kind of hard to come by. It's a Kiyoshi. They're vintage, and they run about, the cheapest one I've seen, I think, is 160. They run between 160, 150 to all the way to $300. Cool chassis, vintage. It is 2-wheel drive as well. But this, I mean, I could almost imagine that it was gonna fit almost perfectly. And then this servo will fit right down the middle. You might have to sacrifice that stick, that Vamp stick here, to accommodate this servo. Again though, this is a lock differential. I don't like that. Lock differential, I'm pretty sure you're aware of the lock differential and the unlock differentials. I don't like the lock differentials. When they get boggled down, then they struggle. I don't know. I mean, I'm still debating what I can do to that. But 2-wheel drive, so you don't get that 4-wheel drive, and you do get that low profile. As you can see, very minimalistic steering up here, and very minimalistic engine or motor back here. There's some other chassis out there, 124, 128 scales, RCs. You could probably incorporate into this stuff, but you're looking at a little bit higher prices. You're looking at a little bit more R&D. This is what I've come up with. I'm not saying that this is the only good stuff out there, but this is some of the stuff that is fairly cheap and I think would be best benefits. My go-to, of course, is this one, the chassis. Way too big for the Vamp if you want to maintain the aesthetics. My second choice would be this one, which is the 128 scale small. I'll send you a picture. It's like a blue truck and a small rally car as well. I'll send you versions of that. And then this is my third choice. I think the speed is good. The torque, I still have to figure it out when I finish it. But this steering servo stuff, I mean, this is kind of ingenious using just wire for a spring. And the springs are actually kind of impressive for it being just a wire. I mean, I think I saw a gentleman do I want to say a Tamiya fast attack vehicle, and he modified that probably around the same time that I saw this vehicle come out. He modified his suspension by taking off those shock towers, and then creating a wire system for his vehicle. It gave it a good aesthetics. It's kind of like a Mad Max vehicle. I think it's a Tamiya fast attack vehicle, or it could be a wild one. I'm not too sure, but it's pretty cool. And you can see, I mean, these shocks they're good. And they're wire, and it saves you a lot of space, and you could not modify this Vamp's hood like I did for my other one. So yeah, the electronics. When I'm working with electronics, if the electronics are good enough, then I maintain the electronics. I don't modify it. But you're gonna find a lot of electronics. You're gonna find them in these vehicles in weird places, wherever they can fit it. Because they're not thinking about the interior or making space for seats or figures. So you're gonna find them just in odd places. You might have to cut these wires and then run extensions so you can put it in the back, or you could put it in the front, or wherever you want to put it in order for you to fit. Like, we know that the Vamp has a lot of space in the back, so most of my electronics usually go in the back. But in order to do so, I might have to extend these servo connections. You can find cable extensions on eBay and Amazon, or you might have to put in another piece of wire in there and then solder it back together. When you do that, just be careful. I'm not sure if you've done that stuff before, but get those heatsink covers, and make sure that you put those heatsink covers when you make those connections, because sometimes, and this has happened to me a lot in my learning process, is the wires touch metal, and I'm just thinking of 101 things, and I don't think of that, and I end up burning out a circuit, and then I have to go back, order more, receivers, transmitters, electric speed controllers, ESCs, electric speed control. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Those are some of the tips. Always be thinking like ahead. Think 2 or 3 steps ahead. Try to think, what kind of clearance do I need for these tires? I want to put these tires, but am I going to have to compromise the space of the body? So when you're picking the tires, you want to think about that. The travel distance. Fat tires need more space as opposed to skinny tires. They're going to need less space when they're turning. So think about those clearances. Think if I'm going to move this, how's it going to affect that? And if I affect that, is it going to compromise this? So always be thinking like two or 3 steps ahead. That's one of my tips. Another tip that you want to do, that I suggest, is when you're making cuts to the bodies, do it incrementally. Measure twice, cut once. That old adage. You could always cut more. It's harder to cover up material that was originally there. Again, out of experience, sometimes I get overzealous and I start cutting away, and I'm like, oh no, I think I'm gonna eyeball it, and then as opposed to measuring it, taking the time. And then I end up cutting too much, so I have to do patchwork and repairs, so that takes a lot more time. So be patient with it. You get stuck on something, put it down. Don't try to figure it out right then and there. If you can't figure it out, don't bulldoze your way through it. That's how sometimes I mess up a lot of projects like that. I'm just gonna go ahead and just force it in there, and it doesn't work out. I put it down, I work on another project, or I put it down and maybe visit it next day or a week from then, and I come up with a better solution. These things are not linear. Yeah, I always think, okay, this is what I want it to look like, and how am I gonna get there? And then throughout the process, it just evolves and it changes, and then you're gonna come across different obstacles, and you're gonna have to figure it out. These are some of my techniques. By no means am I an expert. There's a guy out there, Danny Nguyen. If you ever see his videos, his RCs customs just ridiculously awesome. I mean, they're like robotics level, and all he uses is receivers, transmitters, and servos. He's next level. His tutorials are they're pretty good, but he doesn't talk to them, so it's kind of like all hand gestures. As you can see, I'm all hand gestures and I talk a lot. But he's the guy to like emulate if there's anything. Some of his videos are Motorhead. Danny Nguyen, look him up, he's super famous. But yeah, so those are my tips. Hopefully I've covered some of the stuff. Tires, picking your chassis, what you want your custom to look like, the electronics, think ahead, minimize your cuts. So yeah, and the chassis. So you have the white one, the little blue one that I'm still working on getting you a picture of that one, and then I think it was orange color for you, or maybe it was blue for you and it's orange for me. But this chassis, for your project, I would say this one or this one. And then this one, you're definitely gonna have to use my technique of splitting the body, so you could get this wheelbase back. And that, I think I showcase it on some of my other videos. Cut down the middle, maintain the straightness of this, figure out the distance that you want, and then go ahead and cut the drive shaft down the middle, and then put an extender in there. Definitely suggest that you stick with the cow glue. This stuff, these are your go-tos. These are my go-tos. There's some people out there that use talcum powder, baby powder, sand. This is an aggregate for this. This is the coolest crazy glue. I think it's CA glue. There's a lot of makers for this, but if it's CA glue, the curing time varies. So sometimes it's 0 to 5 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds, 10 to 25 seconds. So the drying time is what you want to take note of. And then the aggregate, Johnny Weld, this company I think is going out of business. They're a small company, but this stuff is golden. Like, I try to get my hands as much as I can whenever I hate running out of this stuff. You could also use it as an aggregate. I think sand, charcoal, baking powder. There's a few. If you look up crazy glue like fixes, you'll see people using different kind of aggregate. But think about like cement and concrete. Cement is a binding agent, and then like gravel or sand becomes like the aggregate, which makes it stronger. When I use these combined, and I make connections like plastic to plastic, I let it dry, and then I put another. Let me go back. When I'm working with surfaces, this is like a erector steel part. I have a lot of these. They come in handy because they come in different sizes and they're strong. What I do is I take my Dremel and I score the metal and I score the plastic, and then I use the glue, and then I use the aggregate. That connection, like to take this apart, I'll probably break the plastic before the connection of the glue breaks apart. That's how strong these bonds are. Whenever I make those bonds, I'm very careful because it's so strong, and I end up breaking off the plastic before the bond of the glue breaks apart. This stuff is gold. And then to fill gaps, the epoxy scoped, the 2-part epoxy scoped, that's from Avis, I believe. You can find that on Amazon. That stuff is gold too. That's for like patch work. So yeah, I think I covered a lot. This video is about an hour, man. So yeah, there's a lot to cover. But if there's any other questions, just let me know. And then I'll send you the pictures here shortly. All right, man.